Your catcher is usually your leader, and they have to know what everyone else is supposed to do. And you got to handle the pitching staff, and you got to be the person not afraid to get hurt and get the dirtiest and basically control the field from behind the plate. And that was Blackie.
He had the ability to, I thought, to control a game as most catchers are supposed to do.
And when you're a catcher, your responsibility is to, you see everything, you pull everybody together, you have to work with those pitchers.
No matter who was on the mound, it was Aaron, Joey, Ferland, which was that great three-man rotation. Blackie was that constant.
He had three pitchers that were of different personalities, and he did a great job handling that. And you know, you have to give him a lot of credit for the success of that team.
It wouldn't be, you're going to throw a fastball, you're going to throw it up and in and scare this guy off the plate. Nope. So you going to camp this weekend? You going to do some fishing? Yeah. And that for me was more than talking about baseball. It was keeping my mind away from the baseball and just throwing pitches.
It takes everybody to win, but you know, he was kind of the glue.
He was the baseball glue of that team. You know, he was the guy, you know, that held it together. When they needed it held together during that 4-game run of the tournament, because you need guys like that. And he was the man.
He called the games. He was the man.
He was the man on that team, and in many regards, the glue that sort of kept that team together. He's definitely the leader on that team.
And if you stop and look at him as the total athlete, he was the captain of the soccer team, and he was also the catcher of the baseball team, and point guard. That's leadership.
Those leadership skills and qualities have carried into his adult life. He has a beautiful family, and he's just the rock of the family, you know, and that's not surprising to me because of who he has always been.
Me and him, Little League, Junior High, Pony League, Babe Ruth, Senior Babe Ruth, high school, we were inseparable. I really don't think I could have the success I did without Scott.
Move from the mound to the man behind the mask, Scott Blackie Smith. Watching Major League Baseball with my dad growing up, he always used to say that the most important job on the field was that of the catcher. After watching Scott behind the plate, I knew that to be true. Yes, Scott Blackie Smith, nicknamed Blackie simply because he had jet black hair, might be hard to believe nowadays, but that is why. And also because his friend and teammate, Scott Wilbur Smith, had the exact same name, even the same middle name too. Those nicknames have stuck, and they continue to stuck 30 years later. Walking in tonight, I thought maybe I was at a Smith family reunion and that we might sneak a Hall of Fame ceremony in here on the side. But I will tell you why there are 3 tables of Smiths here tonight. They are proud of what their teenage brother accomplished back in high school, but more importantly, they are here to support the wonderful brother, husband, father, friend, and man that he has become. He is referred to many as the glue that held his team together. Dave Hager called him the cup. But his task behind the plate, especially in 1991, was huge. Calling pitches, seeing the field, working with 3 very different style pitchers and multiple personalities, and yet he made it look easy. Scott was another 3-sport standout in soccer, basketball, and baseball. In soccer and basketball, his quickness was highlighted, and his decision-making skills on the basketball court and baseball field is what made him into the leader that he was. Decisions and ability to communicate are 2 major ingredients of a true leader. The Coach's Award recipient his senior year in basketball, the Foster's Dream Team in soccer, and state champion in baseball. That, my friends, is one hell of a sports resume. Scott is one of the closest friends that I've had in my life, and for someone who's been blessed with many friends, I'm very proud to call him my very best one. And I am very proud and privileged to introduce to you and welcome to the Hall of Fame, Scott Blackie Smith.
All right, good evening. Just real quick, just a quick public service. Randy actually added a 5th and 7th table back there with more memorabilia from stuff growing up. He's got a basketball card. How do you compete with that? Thank you to the 500 Boys and Girls Club and the Hall of Fame committee. I do appreciate the recognition, and you guys do a great job. You know, and the people I've dealt with this, Joel Shagnon, Mike Whaley, KJ Cardinal, I mean, just to put this thing together, you need to give them a round of applause. They're just fabulous. I want to thank my whole family for coming out tonight, my brother Paul, my sister Holly, my sister Jill, and my sister Karen, and their significant others, nieces and nephews, and my family. One thing I wanted to start with is, you know, tell you a little bit about what I'm doing now. So I married Jessica Garland, class of 92, in 1996, no, 98, sorry, 98. I have 3 daughters, Jaden, who's 18, Jaden wave, see, that's Jaden. She's at the University of New Hampshire. My daughter Reagan, who's 17 at Dover High, and Molly, who's 10 at Garrison Elementary School. Jess and I own a real estate company in Dover, and we're partners in a storage facility in Dover, Epping, and Newington. So a little bit about me. So when Joel told me 10 years ago, when Joel told me in January I was getting inducted to the Hall of Fame, I was surprised. I mean, look around, look at the names in front of you. They're all people that, you know, brought us all up. We either played with them, got coached by them, and just to be in this class is, you know, it's very humbling. I do appreciate it, but you wonder sometimes, you know, should I really be there? But nonetheless, I do appreciate the gesture. I thought a lot about what to say tonight, and I really wanted to, I think, highlight on, you know, some of the coaches and leaders that I've had that have molded me as a person. You know, starting in basketball, obviously you start very early in Farmington. You know, played in this gym, and you had Paul Moulton, you had Bill George, Reggie Charette, Butch Garland, who happens to be my father-in-law now, was one of my first coaches, Randy Tatro. You always had former players, current players, and then these guys that would just show up every week. You just knew they were going to be there. Even if you were waiting outside the door 45 minutes before you were supposed to, they'd come in with the cold trunk of uniforms. You'd put them on and freeze, but they smelled bad. But it was great. It's how you, it was kind of your rite of passage to play basketball in Farmington. You guys know what I'm talking about. I don't think you could even get away with that today. And the night game in particular, you know, we always had good competitive games, always had referees. You know, Paul Moulton would stop you if you traveled or did something, and nobody yelled at you, nobody said anything. He said, "Do you know what you did?" "Yep." "Okay, don't do it again." He'd blow the whistle and you'd keep going. And that's how you learned. You started to, you know, get better and not make those mistakes again. And you weren't belittled, nobody was yelling at you early on. Moving into junior high, we played our basketball at the old town hall downtown. And it was an old creaky floor, and in walked Dan Reynolds. Always had jeans on, always had his work boots on, coming from work, and he was very intimidating because you didn't know if he liked you or didn't like you, ever. And he, you know, he would sometimes yell at you and be like, no, you got to be over there. And he'd stare at you just a couple minutes longer than probably was okay. But Dan was great, taught us a lot about how to be good players and good teammates, and got us ready for our next level, which was high school. And going to high school, my freshman and sophomore year, I played JV. My freshman year, our coach was Jose Casado, and he was about, well, I don't even want to say it, so he's scary to this day. So Jose was tough, and he was smart, and he knew what he was doing, and he expected a lot of you. So he would beat you up day in and day out as a freshman. And then I became a sophomore. Well, either something clicked with me, or he was much different. Then he was talking about situations and you know, leadership things. So the first year he's kind of beating you down and see what you had. The second year he's building on what you came up with, and got you ready for varsity, which was a whole nother ball of wax. And the good thing about having Jose on the bench in the varsity games was you knew him pretty well because you spent so much time together, and he became your friend. So Coach Lee would maybe get on you a little bit, and he'd come down and tell you why. So, you know, Coach Lee was busy. He didn't always tell you in the middle of a game why he was taking you out and gave you that look, or didn't look at you and talk to you, because that was worse. But Jose would come down and tell you what you did. Jose is also responsible for the nicknames. He was sick and tired of Scott and I, you know, in the same place. You know, Smith, go there, and we'd both run over. And so my nickname was Blackie. And then he found out Scott's dad's name was Wilbur. And right then and there, after he laughed for about 25 minutes, he said, yeah, you're Wilbur now. And he'd be Wilbur, he'd do his little thing. It was pretty funny. But yeah, that was Jose. And then moving into varsity, obviously, you know, one of the things people would always ask me when I say I'm from Farmington was, oh, did you play basketball for Mike Lee? And yep, I did, and I was definitely proud to say it. And with Coach Lee, the tenacity was always there. Practices were tough. He'd practice with you. He'd bump you. He would, you know, it was always, everybody was, you know, treated the same way. You had to work hard. We weren't the best teams. I'm telling you right now, talent-wise, we're never the best teams. But what we were is probably the toughest team, and we're definitely the most disciplined team. So, you know, there's one situation I have where I was down at that end of the gym. I was a junior having a terrible day, wasn't doing anything right, and I got mad and I drop kicked the ball from that end of the court and hit the scoreboard. It was a different scoreboard, but I hit the scoreboard, and then I thought, uh-oh, what did I do? And he looked at me in his Mike Lee way and went, ha! He's like, you feel better? And I said, yeah. And he said, good. And from right then, I was like, wow, we didn't have to run, we didn't die, nothing really happened. But what I learned from that was he loved the tenacity, but he wanted to see what you did with that after. Was I going to sulk my head and run in the corner? Was I going to? No, I had a better practice from that point on. So, you know, I learned it's okay to screw up. You might get yelled at, you might not, whatever, but you can definitely move on from that. I played soccer growing up just a little while. While I was real young, my brother was my first coach, and we used to go down in his VW Beetle to Dover, and I'd play with a bunch of older kids. So right from that point on, I was always playing with older kids, and wasn't super talented. They were a little bit better, but, you know, I held my own. And then, you know, I think I played till 3rd grade. At that point, I went and played football until 8th grade, you know, with John Thompson, his dad carting us all over the planet, and Ferlin played. And, I mean, we had a lot of Dover kids that always went down to play football down there. But in 9th grade, I decided to play soccer again, and probably my sophomore year, it started to get interesting when Coach Bulger came in. Now, again, we were a basketball town still at that point. Our soccer skills weren't good. We had a bunch of athletes, but Mr. Bolger, did a couple things for me. One, gave me a job. So he had a landscape business that I worked at after school or whenever I could. He was pretty accommodating to my schedule. And probably the most important thing that he did was after I graduated college, I ran into him somewhere and he said, just randomly said, "Oh, I ran into Jessica Garland and she was asking about you." And I said, "Oh." And he told me where she worked and I called her up and the rest is history. So I do owe him for that. So thanks, Coach Bolger. Baseball, there's lots of influences. I mean, running into Eddie DiPrizio tonight, who I think a year or so ago didn't remember who the hell I was. But no, it's good to see him, former coaches here. I want to highlight a couple from Little League in particular, and a couple are the two we've lost most recently that are very near and dear to my heart. Larry Lover he was about as rough as you could get. And all of my friends were on his Davison rubber team, I believe, and I'd go down and I'd just sit there and watch practice. Well, he let me do that a couple times where I was just sitting in the stands, and then eventually he just came over and looked at me, and sorry everybody, but he was probably smoking a cigarette, and he goes, "Are you just gonna sit here and watch, or are you gonna come play?" So from that point on, I'd practice with Davison Rubber, and I'd practice with my Ferns team, and I got multiple times to hit the field, and Larry was much different. And one of the biggest things about Larry was you'd run into him after that, and it's like you never left. He'd look at you, he'd get real excited, and he absolutely 100% cared that you were doing well. He's that person where he's looking at you and you're telling him what you're doing, he's just listening to you, and he was so proud, and obviously has great children, and he was just a big role model to me, and I miss Larry terribly. My next one, and I promise I'll be quick on this one, because you saw what happened to Aaron up here when he brought it up, so Dave Hager. So Dave was my coach from when I was 6 or 7 years old, right through high school. And a lot of baseball was played. And Aaron, I guess, now I can tell you where yeah. So when I would go out, and a lot of times what Aaron was talking about is a catcher would go out and say, "Listen, you got to put the ball here on this hitter," or whatever, when we talk about baseball stuff. Well, I'd go out and ask him, if he's going fishing or whatever, things that interested Aaron, because usually practices and stuff like that never interested Aaron. He just wanted to go fishing and hunting. Well, Dave had told me to do that early on, probably in Little League. He's not going to respond to that. He goes, "Say something stupid when you go out there. Don't say anything about baseball." So I'll make that confession that wasn't me. So Dave also, got a kick out of it. He was going to have me catch when I was real little, and he said, "You got to get a cup." And I said, "Well, what's a cup?" And if you know Dave Hager, he just had this, and I probably shouldn't swear, but he already put the video on where I did. So he had this shit-eating grin on his face, kind of chuckled and walked off. So I went, found out what a cup was, pretty sure it was a couple sizes too big. Yeah, they're sized. I don't know if you knew that they are. But from that point on, he would just call me the cup and give me that same little giggle every time. So again, there's a lot I could say about Dave, but the thing I'll end this on is that he was very proud. He was proud of Aaron, and he was proud of me. And I think he'd be very proud to see us here today. So, Coach Wims. Coach Wims was a 7th grade teacher, and I believe it was our sophomore year he came up to coach varsity baseball. Well, this guy was different, and when I say different, we had black pants, orange shirts, he had white pants, and I don't even know half the time what he had on. You saw some of the pictures. But Coach Wims was exceptionally knowledgeable. and had a way of, I learned how to manipulate people from Coach Wim. Well, no, I'm sorry, not manipulate people. I don't mean that. I mean, he had a way of taking a group of players that you have and getting the most out of them. And it could be, riling them up a little bit, or making them upset, or telling them they stink, or, Larry Sylvain had hit a little, fly ball to win the World Series. If it wasn't a ball that went off the fence, he'd be mad, and Coach Wims would kind of push him on that a little bit. So learned a lot of those things about putting a team together and coaching a group of guys you have, and definitely gave me a lot of free rein my junior year to lead that team. So thank you, Coach. It's good to see you here tonight. The championship team, 91, I don't know what else to say that hasn't been said. Great group of guys. Tonight we have Brian Furlan, Rob Dion, John Thompson, Aaron. Just a very eccentric group of athletes that did it their way. They didn't, we realized we weren't going to be all matching and all. I think, Mike, I don't know if it was you, but it was one of the reporters from Foster's came and they were interviewing me the day before the state championship. And I think Larry had his shirt, no shirts on for anybody. Larry had a shirt wrapped around his head, and he's just looking and he's like, is this the team that's going to play in the championship tomorrow? I go, this is probably the team that's going to win the championship tomorrow. Because you had one hell of a group of athletes right there, and definitely glad I could share that with you and be part of that team. Growing up and, junior high, high school, I was always eager to leave Farmington and go do something else and see what else was out there. And I did that. I went to Western Mass for a couple of years. I went to California and finished college, and but I came back. And I came back and then, visited here a little more. And you start to miss it. And you miss it, as you grow older, you don't realize how much you do miss it. But the things you learned, coaching my daughters or any of that, coaching softball, you can't help but refer back to, well, when I was in high school, this is how it was. If you did that, you'd be in trouble. And, you just miss a lot of those things. And I tried so hard to, get out of here. And I'm just very, very happy that, I am part of this town. One more thank you, obviously, to Joel Shagnon, being a great friend, his family, Ron and Lorraine, took me in, gave me a hard time. I mean, your dad said he's known me since I was knee-high to a grasshopper, and he met me when I was a freshman in high school, but I guess I wasn't that tall, so. But I do appreciate everything the Shagnons have done for me. So as I stand here today, I can definitively tell you I'm very proud of where I'm from, and I'm very proud to be part of your Hall of Fame. Thank you.